Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of User Delight with Microsoft Technology. My name is Sanjiv Venkatram, and in this episode, we'll talk about auto refreshing Power BI from an Excel data source that's on SharePoint Online. More details in the following. Thank you very much. Right. So basically, I have an Excel here on a SharePoint list. I mean, a SharePoint site, sorry. And if I were to open up this Excel, essentially it is a table inside of Excel, and it's got, a transaction table of country and sales, right? I've intentionally kept it simple. So the point here is to focus on the auto refresh, right? So the idea here is that if I were to add line items to this, my Power BI here gets updated automatically, and I get an email informing me that the Power BI refresh is done, right? So let us see this in action first. I go into the Excel, and this is on, again, a SharePoint document library. So as an example, here is my SharePoint site, there's my document library, and this is my Excel, right? So on this, I'm gonna actually go add, some information here. Let us say there's been sales in Philippines on two different dates, right? So basically, I've gone in and appended data to my Excel, right? So with this, if I were to go over to office.com and let us say I go to Outlook, what should happen now is in a minute or so, I should get an email that basically tells me, there you go, that my Power BI has been updated, right? And if I were to open this email, I can copy this. In fact, I have the Power BI open. I'm just merely going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here, hit enter, and this goes away, opens up my Power BI, and now the sales in Philippines has been aggregated. So I've entered the data here. That's $1,100, let us say, and you can see my Power BI has been updated, right? So let us unpack this. First of all, when I go in and add a table on my Excel, I need to make sure that the raw data here is in a tabular format, right? That's the first thing I need to do. Go insert, add a table, name the table, right? The reason why I'm doing it this way is that oftentimes when I talk to different users, uh, they are not able to directly connect their Power BI to the actual data source, be it either in SAP or wherever, including SQL Server. For the simple reason, the IT teams are a bit reticent about giving them direct access to the data source. So what they instead end up doing is exporting an Excel out of SAP, as an example, on a periodic basis. It could be weekly, it could be monthly, for whatever reason, and for whatever frequency, I mean. And then once they export it, they kind of build their Power BI on that, right? So let us say the first week they've got data for, let us say, Singapore. The second week they've got some information for Malaysia and Indonesia, and the third week Philippines, and so on and so forth. They're essentially keeping the table the same, but they're just appending rows to the Excel, and they do it online, right? So this is the starting point. Once they do this, right, so the data source essentially is ready. So what you would do is you would go into your Power BI. You could either do it on powerbi.com, the service, or on the desktop. So essentially I go into my Power BI on the desktop, start a blank report. In fact, I might actually have a report here. Let me see if I've got a report that I could just open up. Yeah, there you go, something like this. Might as well open an existing report, the same report that I just showed you a minute ago. And if I were to go to insert here, and then if I were to go to the, what do you call this? the Power Query editor here. Let me make this a bit bigger. And I'm going to transform data, go over to Power Query. And if I were to do this, essentially, I've got a query here that connects to the Excel, right? So all I basically do is I basically go to a new source, say more, and then ask for SharePoint here. And when I say SharePoint, I see a SharePoint folder. So I'm gonna just connect to the SharePoint folder like so. And then it asks me for the site URL. I go in, find my SharePoint site URL, right? So that is my SharePoint site URL, right? Well, this SharePoint address slash the sites, which is a container, and Power Platform Videos is my actual site. So I go into my Power Query editor, enter the site, click OK. And what this does is it authenticates, first of all, to SharePoint. So you would have to log in with your M365 ID from the company. And then it basically is telling me that on the folder, hey, look, here's an Excel file, right? Now, what I'll do here is I don't want to actually transform, this particular link first off. I just want to get at the data. So I'm merely going to say combine and transform data. So when I say combine and transform data, this goes away, and with the help of some, helper queries, this goes away and shows me the table inside of Excel, right? So I click on this table. This is table 1. Click OK, and lo and behold, it goes away and connects my Power Query now to Excel. Right, there you go, right? So if you want to, you can get rid of the source name, and the rest of it is very similar to what you would do in Power BI. You would clean this up, and then you would close and apply, bring this over to Power BI, and then basically, I'm going to say not now because, this is fairly straightforward. And then you would basically load this into Power BI, and then you would actually publish this report, right? So I've done exactly the same thing. I'm not going to do this again here. I'm just going to say remove the file. And if I were to go over to my workspace here, let me go to my workspace, and then I will go to capacity workspace that I have, and you will see that I've actually published this model, right? So there's my semantic model, right? And this component is very straightforward. It's like publishing any Power BI report to a workspace. Both the report as well as the semantic model get published here, right? And in this report, basically, I just have a table showing the data, right? And this is intentional. The idea here is to focus on the refresh component of the Excel on the SharePoint folder and not so much on the report itself, right? All this report is merely showing is a table of data that I append to in Excel, and it automatically refreshes here, okay? So if I were to go back to the workspace, maybe I can just re-click on it, you will see that there is this semantic model, right? And when I go to the semantic model, what I do is I go to settings, right? So when I go to settings, I go to gateway and cloud connections. And then this is where you would actually go. You don't need an on-premise gateway because we are not using SharePoint on-prem. We are actually using the online version of SharePoint. And so, it basically has connected to my Prudential site. And then you could create a different connection here as an example. You could use an existing connection. And if you were to use a new connection, it basically goes away and asks you, a connection name, ABC, let us say, and there is your SharePoint site. You look at the authentication method, you could use OAuth, and then, that's about it. You edit your credentials here, and then you go away and select your M365 credentials as an example here. And that's about all you need to establish a credential, and then you create this, right? That's about all you need to do. So I'm going to discard changes because I've actually connected already. And then now your data source, which is your SharePoint document library with the Excel, is now connected to your Power BI, right? So you could literally go in and set up, refreshes here, right? You can basically define a data refresh schedule. So you could basically say, hey, look, I want a daily schedule or or a weekly schedule, whichever you want to set up here. You could do that. And I'm going to turn this off because I don't want it here. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Power Automate, and then I'm going to set up a flow that would automatically refresh if there is a change to the Excel on the document library, right? So I go over to Power Automate, and then here, what I do is I create an automated cloud flow. The reason is that I shouldn't manually have to click anything to run the flow. When the data is input or appended to the Excel on SharePoint, on the SharePoint folder, the idea is to run this flow automatically, right? So if I were to say automated cloud flow, and if I were to look for SharePoint here, there are many options here. When an item is created in SharePoint is for the list, but we are not dealing with the list here. But we're dealing with this one where it says when an item or a file is modified, right? So which is exactly our scenario. The file is on a SharePoint document library. So when the file is modified is the trigger for the flow to run, right? So I'm going to go back to my flow here. I've already done this, so there's no point in literally recreating this flow. So I'm going to go back to my flows here, perhaps do a quick refresh here, and I should be able to see my flows. Takes a minute or so for the flows to get refreshed. And the network is a little tiny bit slow. Okay, let me do this. So I'm going to edit this. And when I edit the flow, you'll actually see the components come through, right? So there you go. So there is my site. This is the Power Platform video site. The document library is documents, right? And then when there is a change to the file made on this, and this is all you need. You don't need to point to the file because that's the only file you're going to have on the document library. So that's something from a setup perspective. Kindly locate that one file right on that particular document library, whereby you don't need to go get into the file itself. When you start this, you can just say, hey, that is the only file on the site, and if it's modified, run the flow, right? So you basically, this is the trigger, and then you select your refresh a data set option action in your Power Automate. So you indicate the workspace, you indicate the data set, and then that's about it. That's all you need to do. And then you send yourself an email with the Power BI link so that the user can click on the link and open it, right? You could do it this way, or you could basically say, hey, send me an email that's been refreshed, and then I'll let the users know because I'm a central controller, if you will, of the BI. You could do it that way, or you could just publish an email to, or a Teams. You could even do a Teams chat with your entire team saying that, hey, look, the Power BI has been refreshed with the latest data, right? And that's about it, right? That's about it. And then the flow runs. If I were to go back here, you will see the flow run when I just made the change, right? There you go, it succeeded. So I made the change to the Excel added data from Philippines. So the flow ran, refreshed the data set, sent me an email with the link. That's about it, okay? I trust this actually helps you. Kindly make sure that you organize your Excel properly, that you don't create additional columns. This is merely a week on week, month or month, whichever, refresh of the data from your SAP or whatever your data source is. We're just cutting and pasting existing, table, existing columns, merely appending rows to the Excel. Okay. I trust this helps you. All the very best. Thank you very much, folks.